The sound of metal striking metal rang out from my backyard workshop at 7:30 in the morning, and I knew within minutes that my life in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, was about to get complicated. I had spent 6 months converting the detached garage on my property into a proper blacksmith forge, complete with ventilation systems, fire suppression equipment, and every safety measure recommended by the National Fire Protection Association. What I hadn't counted on was the HOA president living 3 doors down with the hearing of a paranoid hawk and the temperament of a cornered badger. My name is Travis Jameson, and I had been working as a software engineer for 15 years before burning out completely. The monotony of staring at screens, the endless meetings, the corporate politics had all worn me down until I felt like a hollow shell. Then one day, I watched a documentary about traditional blacksmithing, and something clicked. There was something primal and satisfying about shaping metal with hammer and fire, about creating tangible objects with my own hands. I started taking weekend classes at a forge in Scottsdale, and within months, I was hooked. I saved up, bought the house in the Pleasant Valley Estates subdivision specifically because it had that oversized detached garage, and set about transforming my life. The forge itself was a thing of beauty. I had installed a coal forge with a proper chimney system that extended 15 feet above the roofline, well beyond what was required by code. The ventilation hood could clear smoke faster than I could produce it. I had commercial-grade fire extinguishers mounted every 6 feet around the workspace, a sprinkler system tied into the main water line, and fireproof insulation on every surface. My concrete floor was reinforced and coated with a heat-resistant sealant. I had even installed temperature monitors that would alert me if anything got dangerously hot. This wasn't some half-baked hobby setup. This was a professional operation, and I had the receipts to prove it. That first morning, I was working on a simple project, a decorative gate hinge for my neighbor Garrett Mills, the guy who lived on the other side of me, away from the HOA president. Garrett was retired military, sensible, and had actually been excited when I told him about my plans. The rhythmic hammering was therapeutic, the way the hot metal yielded to each strike, gradually taking the shape I envisioned. I was completely absorbed in the work when I heard the banging on my workshop door. I set down my hammer and wiped the sweat from my forehead. Through the window, I could see a woman in her mid-50s with severely pulled-back blonde hair and an expression that suggested she had been personally victimized by my existence. I recognized her immediately. Patricia Delmont, HOA president, holder of the most immaculate lawn in the subdivision, and rumored terror of anyone who dared paint their front door the wrong shade of beige. I opened the door, and before I could even say hello, she launched into her attack. "What do you think you are doing?" Her voice was shrill enough to cut glass. "Do you have any idea what time it is? There are noise ordinances in this community. More importantly, there are regulations about what kinds of activities can be conducted in residential properties." I took a breath and tried to keep my voice level. "Good morning, Patricia. I'm working in my shop. It's 7:30, well after the noise ordinance cutoff of 7 a.m. for our county. As for the activities, I've checked all the local zoning laws. There's nothing prohibiting me from operating a small-scale forge on my property." Her face flushed red. "A forge? You have a fire going in there. Are you insane? You're going to burn down the entire neighborhood. I'm calling the fire department right now." "That's certainly your right," I said, keeping my tone calm even though my heart was starting to pound. "But I should let you know that everything in here is up to code. I've got proper ventilation, fire suppression, the works." "We'll see about that," she snapped, already pulling out her phone. And don't think I won't be calling the police too. This is absolutely unacceptable." She stormed off, already barking into her phone about the dangerous criminal operating an illegal industrial facility in a residential zone. I watched her go, then closed the door and leaned against it. This was exactly what I had been afraid of. I knew the HOA had strict rules, but I had read through the entire covenant document 3 times. There was nothing in there about forges or blacksmithing. There were rules about not running certain types of businesses from home, but I wasn't running a business yet. I was practicing a craft, same as if I was woodworking or painting. I walked back to my anvil, but the mood was broken. I couldn't focus on the hinge anymore. Instead, I started cleaning up, making sure everything was properly organized and safe looking. If the fire department was coming, I wanted them to see a professional setup, not some chaotic mess. 20 minutes later, I heard the sirens. My stomach dropped. She had actually done it. Called the fire department with enough urgency that they were responding with full lights and sirens. I walked out to my driveway and saw not 1 but 2 fire trucks pulling up, along with a white SUV that had Fire Marshal written on the side. Behind them, a Phoenix Police Department cruiser rolled up as well. Patricia stood on her lawn, arms crossed, looking vindicated. The first firefighter out was a young guy, probably in his late 20s, who looked more curious than alarmed. The fire marshal, however, was a different story. He was a stocky man in his 50s with gray hair and a weathered face that suggested he had seen everything. His name tag read Chief Robert Hendricks. He approached me with a clipboard and a neutral expression. "You Travis Jameson?" he asked. "Yes, sir, that's me." "I'm Fire Marshal Hendricks. We got a call about an illegal forge operation at this address. Mind if I take a look?" "Not at all," I said, gesturing toward the workshop. "Everything's open. I've got all my documentation inside, too." Patricia inserted herself into the conversation, practically vibrating with righteous anger. "He's been hammering away in there all morning. There's smoke coming from the chimney." "This is a residential neighborhood, not an industrial zone. Surely there are laws against this sort of thing." Chief Hendricks gave her a patient look that suggested he had dealt with many Patricia Delmonts in his career. "Madam, I appreciate your concern for safety. That's why we're here. Let me do my inspection, and we'll get this sorted out." He followed me into the workshop, and I saw his eyebrows raise slightly as he took in the setup. He walked slowly around the space, examining the forge, the ventilation system, the fire suppression equipment. He checked the chimney connection, looked at the clearances around the forge, tested the sprinkler system. The young firefighter followed him, taking notes. After about 15 minutes of silence, Chief Hendricks turned to me. "Walk me through your safety protocols." I did. I explained the ventilation system, how I monitored temperature, the fire watch procedures I followed, how I stored my fuel and materials, the fireproof clothing I wore. I showed him my fire extinguisher inspection logs. I pulled out the folder where I kept copies of all my equipment specifications and installation documentation. He nodded slowly, flipping through the paperwork. "You did your homework." "I tried to," I said. "I know this isn't typical for a residential area. I wanted to make sure I was doing it right." "This is better than some commercial operations I've seen," he admitted. "Your ventilation is excellent. Fire suppression is top-notch. Clearances are all good. You've got proper PPE." He paused, looking at me directly. "Have you had any incidents? Any fires, injuries, close calls?" "No, sir." "Nothing. I've been working in here for about 2 months now. Before that, I spent 6 months taking classes at the Ironworks Studio in Scottsdale. My instructor there was certified, and he was pretty strict about safety." Chief Hendricks made a few more notes on his clipboard. "All right. Here's the situation. What you're doing here isn't illegal. There's no law against operating a small forge on your own property as long as you meet safety standards. And from what I'm seeing, you exceed them. Relief flooded through me. So I can keep working. Not quite yet, he said. What you need is a home-based work operations permit. It's basically a certificate that says the fire department has inspected your operation and found it compliant with safety codes. There's an application process and there is a fee, but based on what I'm seeing here, I don't anticipate any problems. How long does that take? The inspection is basically done. I'll need you to fill out some paperwork, pay the fee, and I can issue the permit today. Consider this your official inspection. We walked back outside, where Patricia was still standing on her lawn, now joined by two other neighbors I recognized but didn't know well. The police officer, a woman in her 30s with a no-nonsense expression, was leaning against her cruiser, clearly waiting to see how this played out. Chief Hendricks addressed Patricia directly. "Madam, I've completed my inspection. The forge operation is safe and meets all applicable fire codes. Mr. Jameson will be applying for a home-based work operations permit, which I'll be issuing once the paperwork is complete." Patricia's face went from red to purple. "You cannot be serious. He's operating a forge in a residential neighborhood." "The noise, the smoke, the danger. The noise is within legal limits based on the time of day," Chief Hendricks interrupted. "The smoke is minimal and properly vented, and the danger is well managed. This is one of the better home workshop setups I've seen. But the HOA rules are between you and Mr. Jameson to work out," he said firmly. "My job is safety, and from a fire safety perspective, there's no issue here." The police officer pushed off her cruiser and walked over. Her name tag read Officer Martinez. "Sounds like there's no crime being committed here either. Sir," she addressed me, "you're good to go from our perspective. Madam," she turned to Patricia, "maybe next time don't call 911 for an HOA dispute." Patricia looked like she was about to explode. "This is not over," she said, pointing at me. "I'm calling an emergency HOA board meeting. You're in violation of multiple community standards." "Looking forward to it," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice and failing. The emergency vehicles left, but Chief Hendricks stayed behind in his SUV for another 30 minutes while I filled out the permit application on his tablet. The fee was $250, which I paid on the spot with a credit card. He printed out a temporary permit certificate right there from a mobile printer in his vehicle. "This is good for 90 days, he explained. "The permanent certificate will come in the mail within 2 weeks. Post this somewhere visible in your workshop, and keep up the good safety practices. I'll be doing a follow-up inspection in about 6 months, just routine." "Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this right." He nodded. "You're a responsible guy. I wish more people approached things the way you did, but let me give you some advice. That HOA president, she's going to make your life difficult. Make sure you've got your documentation in order. Read your HOA covenant forward and backward, and maybe consider getting a lawyer to look at it too." "I think you're right," I said. After he left, I went back inside my house and made coffee. My hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline. I had been so sure that I was in the right, but having the authorities show up at your door is stressful no matter what. At least it had worked out. I had my permit. Everything was legal and documented. I spent the rest of the day researching HOA law in Arizona. What I found was both encouraging and concerning. HOAs had a lot of power when it came to enforcing their covenants, but they also had to follow their own rules. They couldn't just make up new regulations on the spot. Any rule changes had to go through a proper process, including notice to homeowners and usually a vote. and they couldn't enforce rules that were illegal or that violated a homeowner's reasonable use of their property. The Pleasant Valley Estates Covenant was a 40-page document full of regulations about lawn maintenance, paint colors, fence heights, and acceptable holiday decorations. But nowhere in those 40 pages was there anything about forges, welding, metalworking, or anything that would clearly prohibit what I was doing. There was a section about not running businesses that generated excessive traffic or noise, but I wasn't running a business yet, and even if I wasn't generating foot traffic or excessive noise. I called my buddy Derek, who was a real estate attorney. I explained the situation, and he agreed to look over the HOA documents for me. 2 days later, he called me back. "Travis, I've read through everything. You're in the clear," he said. "There's nothing in the covenant that prohibits your forge. The closest thing is the home business clause, but that's specifically about businesses that affect the neighborhood, like increased traffic or commercial signage. What you're doing is a hobby, and even if you start selling pieces, as long as you're not having customers coming to your house or putting up business signs, you're fine. What about if they try to pass a new rule? They can try, but it would take time. They'd need to give 30 days notice to all homeowners, hold a meeting, and get a majority vote. And even then, rules have to be reasonable. They can't target you specifically, and they can't prohibit activities that are legal and don't genuinely harm the community. If they try to ban your forge, you'd have grounds to challenge it. Good to know. Thanks, Derek. No problem, and Travis, keep records of everything. Every interaction with the HOA, every email, every letter. If this escalates, you'll want documentation." The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening at the community clubhouse. The notice went out via email to all residents, with the subject line, "Emergency Meeting Regarding Dangerous and Illegal Activities in Our Community." I couldn't help but laugh at the dramatics. On Thursday, I showed up 15 minutes early. The clubhouse was a modest building with a meeting room, a small kitchen, and not much else. Patricia was already there, setting up a projector and looking like she was preparing for war. The other board members trickled in. There was Donald Kramer, the vice president, a retired accountant who seemed perpetually worried about everything. Margaret Finley, the treasurer, a stern woman in her 60s who kept the HOA finances with an iron fist. And Timothy Yates, the secretary, a middle-aged man who worked in insurance and seemed to pride himself on finding loopholes in everything. Residents started arriving around 6:45. I was surprised by the turnout. At least 30 people showed up, which was about a third of the subdivision. Garrett Mills arrived and sat next to me, giving me a supportive nod. A few other neighbors I knew by sight gave me curious or sympathetic looks. But there was also a contingent that seemed to be Team Patricia, mostly older residents who clustered near the front. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We have a serious matter to address. As many of you may have heard, one of our residents has been operating an industrial forge on his residential property, creating noise, smoke, and a serious fire hazard." I raised my hand. "Point of order. The fire marshal disagrees with your characterization." She glared at me. "You'll have your turn to speak. Right now, I'm presenting the board's concerns." She clicked to her first slide, which was a picture of my chimney with smoke coming out of it. "This is what we're dealing with. Heavy smoke, polluting our air, creating health hazards for residents with respiratory issues." The smoke in the picture was barely visible, just a light wisp. It was less than what came out of most people's fireplaces in the winter. Next slide. "This is the noise pollution we're subjected to. It was a video of my workshop with the door open, the sound of hammering audible. She had clearly recorded it from her own backyard. The hammering was rhythmic and not particularly loud, but she had somehow turned the volume up in the video to make it sound worse. "This goes on for hours," she continued, disturbing the peace, making it impossible for people to enjoy their own yards. Garrett raised his hand. "I live right next door to Travis and I barely hear it, and it's only during normal daytime hours." Patricia ignored him. "And most concerning of all, this is a fire hazard. We're talking about open flames, extreme temperatures, all in a wooden structure in a densely populated neighborhood. One accident and the entire subdivision could burn down." I raised my hand again. "Can I respond now?" She pursed her lips. "Fine. State your case." I stood up and walked to the front. "First, I want to make it clear that I respect this community and my neighbors. I'm not trying to cause problems. I'm pursuing a craft that I'm passionate about, and I've done everything possible to do it safely and responsibly." I pulled out my folder. "I have here a home-based work operations permit issued by the Phoenix Fire Department. Fire Marshal Robert Hendricks personally inspected my workshop and found it to be in full compliance with all safety codes. In fact, he told me it was one of the better home workshop setups he'd seen." I passed the permit around so people could see it. "The smoke you see is minimal. It's less than what comes from a charcoal grill or a fireplace. The ventilation system I installed is commercial grade and filters most of it anyway. As for noise, I only work during daylight hours, well within the legal limits, and I've checked the HOA covenant thoroughly. There's nothing in there that prohibits what I'm doing." Donald, the vice president, spoke up. "But surely this falls under the home business restrictions." "It's not a business," I said. "It's a hobby. I'm not selling anything. I'm not having customers come to my house. I'm just practicing a craft." "Yet," Patricia interjected. "You're not selling anything yet, but that's clearly your intent, to run a commercial forge operation out of a residential property." "If and when I decide to sell my work, I'll make sure I'm in compliance with all relevant regulations," I said. "But right now, that's not what we're talking about. Right now, I'm a hobbyist with a legal, permitted, safe workshop." Margaret, the treasurer, looked at the permit certificate. "This does appear to be legitimate. I'm not sure we have grounds to prohibit activity that the fire department has approved." "Then we need to pass a new rule," Patricia said. "We need to ban forges and similar industrial equipment from residential properties." "On what grounds?" asked a voice from the audience. It was Garrett. "The man's not hurting anyone. He's got all his permits. He's being safe." "Since when do we ban legal activities just because one person doesn't like them?" "This is about protecting property values," Patricia shot back. "Do you think people want to buy houses next to a forge? The noise, the smoke, the industrial appearance, it all brings down the neighborhood." "Actually," said another voice, it was a woman I didn't know, maybe in her 40s. "I think it's kind of cool. My son was asking me about it. I told him it was like having a real blacksmith in the neighborhood, like in the old days. He thought that was awesome." A few people laughed. Patricia's face was getting red again. "This isn't a joke," she said. "This is about maintaining standards. We all signed covenants when we bought our homes. We all agreed to abide by certain rules that keep this community desirable." Timothy, the secretary, had been quietly reading through a copy of the covenant. He looked up. "Patricia, I've been through this twice now. There really isn't anything in here that covers this situation, and if we want to pass a new rule, we have to follow the amendment process. That means 30 days notice, a full community meeting, and a 2/3 majority vote." "Then that's what we'll do," Patricia said. "I'm proposing right now that we draft an amendment prohibiting forge operations and similar industrial activities. I'll oppose it, I said. And I'll make sure every homeowner understands what you're really trying to do. You're trying to target one person, engaging in illegal activity because you personally don't like it. That's not how HOAs are supposed to work. How dare you, she started, but Donald cut her off. Let's all calm down. This is clearly something we need to think about carefully. Timothy, can you draft a proposed amendment for us to review? We'll schedule a proper meeting with full notice and let the community decide. The meeting devolved into arguments after that. Some people supported me, saying they didn't see a problem with the forge. Others sided with Patricia, worried about safety or property values or just general principles about maintaining residential character. It went in circles for another hour before Donald finally adjourned the meeting without any real resolution. As people filed out, several neighbors came up to me. Some were supportive, saying they thought Patricia was overreaching. Others expressed concerns but seemed willing to hear me out. And a few made it clear they were Team Patricia all the way. Garrett walked out with me. That was something, he said. Patricia really has it out for you. Yeah, I noticed. I just don't get it. I'm not hurting anyone. You're doing something different. Something she doesn't understand or approve of. That's enough for people like her. Over the next few weeks, things got worse before they got better. Patricia started a campaign to drum up support for her proposed amendment. She sent emails to the entire subdivision, painting my forge as a neighborhood menace. She posted in the community Facebook group, sharing cherry-picked photos and making wild claims about fire risk and air quality. She even went door to door, talking to residents and collecting signatures on a petition, but something unexpected happened. The more Patricia pushed, the more people pushed back. Garrett became my unofficial PR manager, posting factual information about forges and blacksmithing in the Facebook group. He shared articles about the traditional craft, photos of beautiful metalwork, and explanations of the safety measures I had taken. Other neighbors chimed in, some defending me directly, others just questioning whether the HOA should be in the business of banning legal hobbies. The woman from the meeting, whose name I learned was Jennifer Ortiz, asked if she could bring her 10-year-old son Michael to see the forge. I agreed and gave them a tour on a Saturday morning. Michael was fascinated, asking a million questions about how everything worked. Jennifer took photos and posted them on Facebook with a long comment about how it was refreshing to see someone practicing a traditional craft, and how her son was inspired to learn more about metalworking and history. That post got more engagement than any of Patricia's fear-mongering. People started asking questions. Could they see the forge too? Would I consider teaching classes? What kind of things did I make? I found myself giving impromptu tours to curious neighbors, showing off my safety equipment, explaining the craft. Most people who actually saw the setup came away impressed, rather than concerned. But Patricia wasn't giving up. The official HOA amendment proposal came out 3 weeks after the emergency meeting. It was titled Prohibition of Industrial and Manufacturing Activities, and it was clearly written to target my forge while trying to sound generally applicable. It prohibited any activity involving open flames used for manufacturing purposes, metalworking equipment including but not limited to forges and welding apparatus, or any activity generating temperatures in excess of 500 degrees Fahrenheit for commercial or production purposes. Derek, my lawyer friend, reviewed it for me. "This is a mess," he said. "It's so broad it would technically ban gas grills and pottery kilns, and the commercial or production purposes language doesn't even apply to you since you're not running a commercial operation. This is a poorly written amendment designed to target you specifically. Can they pass it? They can try. But I think you've got grounds to challenge it if they do. Rules have to be reasonable and applied equally. This isn't either of those things. The official vote was scheduled for exactly 30 days after the amendment was proposed, as required by the covenant. In that time, the community became deeply divided. Patricia's faction argued that the HOA needed to maintain control over what happened in the neighborhood, that allowing industrial activities would set a bad precedent. My supporters argued that people should be able to pursue legal hobbies on their own property without interference, and that the HOA was overstepping. I decided to do something proactive. I organized an open house at my workshop. I sent an invitation to every household in the subdivision, offering tours every hour on a Saturday afternoon. I made sure the forge was cold, so people could walk right up to it and see how it worked. I put out pamphlets about blacksmithing safety. I had my permits and documentation displayed prominently. I even made cookies, because cookies make everything better. About 40 people showed up throughout the day. Some were already supporters. Some were curious fence-sitters. A few were Patricia's allies, clearly there to find ammunition for their arguments. But I treated everyone the same, answering questions honestly, addressing concerns directly. One older gentleman, Mr. Richard Foster, who lived at the end of the street, spent a long time examining my ventilation system. He had been an engineer before retiring, and he asked technical questions that showed he actually understood what he was looking at. "This is impressive," he finally said. "You really did this right. I'll be honest, I was worried when Patricia started talking about fire hazards. But this is safer than most garages I've seen. At least you don't have gasoline cans sitting next to a water heater." "That's what I've been trying to explain," I said. "I take this seriously. I don't want to put anyone at risk." "You've got my vote," he said. "I don't think we should be banning safe, legal activities. That's not what HOAs are for." The night before the vote, Patricia made one last desperate move. She sent an email claiming that my forge had caused property values to drop. She cited a realtor who allegedly said that homes near my property would be harder to sell. It was complete nonsense, and easily disprovable since no homes in the subdivision had even gone on the market in the past month. But it was time to hit people's inboxes right before the meeting, too late for me to effectively counter it. The voting meeting was packed. Nearly every household sent a representative. The tension in the room was palpable. Patricia went first, giving an impassioned speech about protecting the community, maintaining standards, and preventing dangerous activities. She brought up children's safety, property values, and the general principle that residential neighborhoods shouldn't have industrial activities. Then it was my turn. I kept it simple. I'm not asking to do anything dangerous or illegal. I'm asking to practice a craft that I love on my own property, in a way that's safe and permitted by the fire department. The proposed amendment is poorly written, overly broad, and specifically targets me for doing something that's not hurting anyone. If you ban my forge, what's next? Someone's pottery kiln, someone's wood shop. Where does it end? I trust you all to make the right decision. The vote was by secret ballot. Timothy collected and counted them while we all waited in uncomfortable silence. It felt like it took forever. Finally, he looked up. "The results are in. Total votes cast, 72. For the amendment, 31. Against the amendment, 41. The amendment fails to achieve the required 2/3 majority." Relief washed over me. It wasn't just that the amendment had failed. It was that more people had voted against it than for it. The community had sided with me. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. She gathered her papers abruptly and left without saying a word. Donald, looking uncomfortable, adjourned the meeting, Garrett clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it, man." "We did it," I said. I couldn't have won without everyone who spoke up. Over the next few days, things slowly returned to normal. Patricia's campaign posts disappeared from the Facebook group. The hostile emails stopped. I went back to working in my forge during reasonable hours, and the world kept turning. About a week after the vote, I was working on a commission piece. After the open house, several people had asked if I would make things for them. I had decided to take a few commissions, nothing major, just custom pieces for people I knew. This particular project was a set of decorative shelf brackets for Jennifer Ortiz, the woman whose son had been so interested in the forge. I heard a knock on the workshop door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see Mr. Foster standing there. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "Not at all. Come in." He looked around the workshop again, taking in the organized space, the tools hanging neatly on the walls. "I wanted to ask you something. My grandson is 14 and he's really interested in learning trades. Doesn't want to go to college, wants to work with his hands. His parents are worried, thinking he won't have opportunities. But I think trades are going to be huge in the coming years. Would you be willing to take him on as an apprentice? Nothing formal, just teach him some basics. Let him learn what it's like to do this kind of work." I thought about it. Teaching wasn't something I had considered, but the idea appealed to me. "I'd be happy to. Have him come by next Saturday morning. We'll start with safety training and basic tool use." Word spread. By the end of the month, I had 3 teenage apprentices coming by on Saturday mornings. Michael Ortiz, Mr. Foster's grandson David, and a 15-year-old girl named Samantha whose parents thought it would be good for her to learn practical skills. I taught them about fire safety, tool maintenance, the basics of heating and shaping metal. It was rewarding in a way I hadn't expected. 3 months after the vote, I was working in the shop when I heard emergency sirens in the neighborhood. I stepped outside and saw smoke rising from somewhere a few streets over. My heart sank. Fire trucks were heading in that direction. Later that evening, I learned what had happened. A house fire had started in someone's garage. The homeowner had been storing paint cans and chemicals near an old furnace. Something had ignited, and the fire had spread quickly. The fire department had gotten it under control before it reached the house, but the garage was a total loss. The next day, Chief Hendricks showed up at my door. "Heard about the fire?" he asked. "Yeah, is everyone okay?" "Everyone's fine, fortunately, but it got me thinking. The fire started because of unsafe storage practices. Meanwhile, you've got an actual forge running and you're the safest operation in the neighborhood. I was wondering if you'd be willing to do something for me." "What's that?" "Give a safety presentation at the community center. Talk about your forge, your safety practices, general workshop safety. I think people could learn something." I agreed. The presentation was scheduled for a Tuesday evening 2 weeks later. I wasn't sure anyone would show up, but I put together a slideshow about workshop safety, proper storage of flammable materials, and the importance of having the right equipment and training. To my surprise, about 30 people came. I walked them through my safety protocols, showed photos of my workshop setup, talked about fire prevention and response. Chief Hendricks was there, adding his own comments and recommendations. People asked questions, took notes, seemed genuinely interested. After the presentation, several people came up to thank me. One man said he was going to reorganize his workshop based on what he had learned. A woman said she was going to check her smoke detectors and get a fire extinguisher for her garage. Even Donald, the HOA vice president, approached me. "That was informative," he said. "I'll admit I was skeptical about your forge at first, but you've really shown that you know what you're doing. And this presentation, volunteering your time to help people be safer, that says a lot about your character." "I appreciate that," I said. "Between you and me," he continued quietly, "Patricia has been a problem for a while. She means well, but she thinks the HOA should control everything. This situation with your forge really highlighted that. The board has been discussing it. We might not be renewing her term as president." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. I worked my software job during the week, though I had negotiated to go part-time. In the afternoons and on weekends, I worked in the forge. The commissions kept coming, slowly at first, then picking up. I made decorative pieces mostly, custom gates, railings, fireplace tools, garden art. Nothing massive, but enough to feel like I was building something real. The apprentices kept showing up every Saturday. We worked on projects together, and I watched them develop real skills. David, Mr. Foster's grandson, turned out to have a natural talent for the work. He was patient, detail-oriented, and willing to put in the hours of practice necessary to improve. By the 6-month mark, he was creating pieces that I would have been proud to make. One Saturday morning, about 9 months after the whole HOA debacle started, I was teaching the kids about forge welding when Patricia walked up to the workshop. I hadn't spoken to her since the night of the vote. She had lost the HOA presidency in the next election, as Donald had hinted might happen. A younger couple had taken over the leadership, and from what I heard, things were running more smoothly. "Travis," she said, "can I talk to you for a minute?" I told the kids to take a break and walked outside with her. She looked different somehow, less rigid maybe, tired. "I wanted to apologize," she said. The words seemed to cost her something. "I was wrong about the forge. I was wrong about how I handled it. I let my fear and my need for control override good judgment." I didn't know what to say. This was the last thing I had expected, she continued. "After I lost the election, I did a lot of thinking about why I cared so much, why I fought so hard against something that wasn't actually hurting anyone. I think I was scared of change, scared of things I didn't understand. I spent so long trying to keep everything perfect and controlled that I forgot what community actually means." "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "It takes guts to admit when you're wrong. I saw your presentation on workshop safety. I wasn't there, but Donald told me about it. And I see these kids here every Saturday learning from you. You've been good for this neighborhood, better than I was." "You care about this place," I said. "That counted for something. You just got too caught up in the rules and forgot about the people." She nodded. "Anyway, I wanted you to know, and I wanted to say I'm sorry." Apology accepted. She started to leave, then turned back. "The stuff you make. Is it expensive?" "Depends on the piece." "Why?" "My daughter is getting married next year. I was thinking custom candle holders for the tables might be nice. Something handmade, unique." I smiled. "I think I could do that. Come by sometime and we'll talk about what you're looking for." A year after I started the forge, I held an open forge day. I invited the whole neighborhood to come see demonstrations, try their hand at basic techniques with supervision, and see what the apprentices had been working on. We set up displays of finished pieces, safety information, and historical context about blacksmithing. Over 100 people showed up throughout the day. Kids hammered on practice pieces under careful supervision. Adults asked about commissions. People took photos and posted them on social media. The local news even sent a reporter who did a short segment about the traditional craft alive in suburban Phoenix. Chief Hendricks came by with a few other firefighters. "This is great," he said, looking around at the crowd. "You know, you're the only home-based work operations permit holder in the city who's turned their workshop into a community education opportunity." Most people just want to be left alone to do their thing. I figured if I was going to fight for the right to do this, I should make it worth everyone's while, I said. Garrett was manning the grill, cooking burgers and hot dogs for anyone who was hungry. Jennifer was helping organize the kids' activities. Mr. Foster was giving an impromptu lecture about metallurgy to anyone who would listen. Even Donald and the new HOA president came by, bringing their families and seeming genuinely interested in the demonstrations. I stood back and watched it all, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Satisfaction, purpose, community. This was what I had been missing during all those years in the corporate world, not just the work itself, though I loved the forge, but the connections, the teaching, the sense of building something that mattered. David, my star apprentice, was demonstrating proper hammer technique to a group of curious teenagers. He had decided to pursue metalworking seriously and was already looking at trade school programs. His parents had been skeptical at first, but seeing his passion and skill, they had come around. Mr. Foster beamed with pride every time he watched his grandson work. Michael, Jennifer's son, was helping younger kids with a simple project, making S-hooks from mild steel rod. He had patience with them, explaining each step carefully, just like I had taught him. Samantha was showing off a complex piece she had made, a decorative plant hanger with Celtic knotwork that had taken her months to complete. She was fielding questions from adults who couldn't believe a 15-year-old had made something so intricate. As the sun started to set, people began filtering out, thanking me for the event, saying it had been educational and fun. Families left with small items the kids had made, proud of their minor accomplishments. Several people mentioned they would be reaching out about commissions. After everyone left, I stood in the workshop, looking around at the space that had caused so much conflict and ultimately brought so much good into my life. The forge was still warm, the smell of coal smoke and hot metal lingering in the air. Tools hung in their designated spots on the walls. The anvil sat solid and patient, scarred from thousands of hammer strikes, ready for thousands more. My phone buzzed. It was an email from a gallery in Scottsdale. They had seen the news segment and wanted to discuss carrying some of my work. I smiled. What had started as a desperate attempt to escape burnout and find meaning had turned into something real, something sustainable. But more than that, it had taught me something important about community and standing up for what you believe in. Patricia had tried to shut me down because she was afraid, because I was different, because she didn't understand. And if I had just given up, accepted that the HOA could dictate what legal activities I could pursue on my own property, where would that have led? How many other people would have been discouraged from pursuing their passions, from doing things that made them happy and fulfilled? Sometimes you have to fight for your right to be different. Not obnoxiously, not confrontationally, but firmly. You have to stand your ground, follow the rules, do things the right way, and trust that reason will eventually prevail. You have to be willing to educate people, to show them rather than just tell them, to bring them into your world and help them understand. The fire marshal's inspection and permit hadn't just been a piece of paper saying I could legally operate my forge. It had been validation, proof that I was doing things right, ammunition against baseless fears and accusations. Without that permit, without Chief Hendricks taking the time to do a thorough inspection and issue proper documentation, Patricia's campaign might have succeeded. The HOA might have banned the forge, and I would have been back at square one. But with that permit, with proper safety measures, with transparency and education, I had turned opponents into supporters. Not all of them, probably never Patricia entirely, but enough. Enough to win the vote, enough to build something lasting, enough to make a difference in my community. I locked up the workshop and walked back to my house. Through the windows, I could see Garrett's place next door, lights on in his kitchen. Beyond that, the houses of Pleasant Valley estates stretched out in neat rows, each one containing people with their own dreams, their own passions, their own struggles. We were all just trying to live our lives, find meaning, connect with each other. The HOA had a role to play in that, maintaining standards that helped everyone coexist peacefully. But it was a delicate balance. Too much control, too much fear of anything different, and you ended up stifling the very things that made a community vibrant and alive. People like Patricia, well-meaning but rigid, could do more harm than good if they weren't checked by reason and common sense. I thought about where I had been a year ago. Burned out, desperate for change, terrified that I had made a mistake buying this house and investing in this dream. The morning Patricia had shown up at my workshop door, furious and threatening, I had felt sick with worry. What if she was right? What if I was being selfish and reckless? What if my dream put other people at risk? But I had done my homework. I had taken every precaution. I had followed every rule. And when challenged, I had stood firm while remaining respectful. I had let the facts speak for themselves. The fire marshal's inspection had vindicated me. But it was everything that came after, the open houses, the apprentices, the safety presentation, the community engagement that had really won the day. Looking back, I could see that the conflict with the HOA, as stressful as it was, had actually been good for me and for the community. It had forced me to be transparent, to open up my workshop and my process to scrutiny. It had pushed me to become an educator and a community resource, not just a hobbyist working in isolation. It had created connections I never would have made otherwise, and it had taught everyone else something too. That HOAs should serve their communities, not rule them. That being different isn't the same as being dangerous. That traditional crafts and skills still have value in the modern world. That sometimes the thing you fear is actually the thing that will enrich your life if you give it a chance. The next morning, Sunday, I slept in for the first time in weeks. When I finally got up and made coffee, I found myself already planning the next project. A custom gate for a customer in Temp. A set of fireplace tools for Garrett, a thank you for all his support. A sculptural piece I wanted to try just for myself, pushing my skills in new directions. But first, I was going to take the day off. Maybe go hiking in the McDowell Mountains, clear my head, enjoy the Arizona sunshine. The forge would still be there tomorrow. The work would still be there. But right now, I just wanted to appreciate how far I had come and how good it felt to have fought for something that mattered and won. My phone buzzed again. Another commission inquiry. Then a text from David asking about technique for a project he was planning. Then an email from the gallery with contract details. Life was full and busy and complicated and absolutely perfect. I walked outside and looked at my workshop. Smoke stacks visible above the roofline. The metal door shut but not locked. Inside was heat and noise and creation, the ancient craft of shaping metal with hammer and fire. Outside was community, connection, the modern world with all its rules and conflicts and possibilities. I had bridged those two worlds. I had taken something old and made it new again. I had stood up to unreasonable opposition and prevailed through patience, preparation, and persistence. The fire marshal's permit hung on my workshop wall, official validation that I was doing things right. But the real validation was the relationships I had built, the skills I had shared, the passion I had reignited in myself and sparked in others. As I stood there in my driveway, coffee cup in hand, watching the sun rise over the Phoenix suburbs, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the peace of having nothing to do, but the peace of knowing I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. The HOA could have stopped me. Fear could have stopped me. Self-doubt could have stopped me, but none of those things had won. The forge still burned, the hammer still rang, and the work continued. And that, more than any permit or any vote or any victory over HOA bureaucracy, was what really mattered. I had found my purpose. I had built my community. I had created something lasting and meaningful. The rest was just details, just obstacles overcome, just stories to tell. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, and started planning my hike. Tomorrow I would fire up the forge again. Tomorrow I would teach and create and build. Tomorrow I would continue the work that had transformed my life. But today, I would rest and reflect and appreciate the journey that had brought me here. The sound of metal on metal would ring out again soon enough. The smoke would rise from the chimney, the heat would shimmer in the workspace, the ancient craft would continue. But right now, in this moment, everything was quiet and still and perfect. I had fought for my right to pursue my passion, and I had won. The fire marshal had given me the permit, but I had done the rest, and that made all the difference.